How many of y'all, when you had kids or when you were kids, do you remember playing hide and seek? Y'all remember that? I don't remember it much when I was all that little, but I remember playing it most with my kids. And oh, there she is. She's back, so I get to. I was telling the story about. Hopefully, it won't embarrass her too much. But I'd sit down. What's really funny is when you're playing hide and seek with your kids, especially when they're little. I'd sit down on the couch or something, and cover my eyes and start counting, and they'd go run off and find a place to hide. Right? Remember this? At first, their version of hiding, when they're really little, their version of hiding is more like that. They think that as long as they can't see you, then you can't really see them either. Right? This was Mariah a lot. Mariah did this. They'd cover their eyes, and all that. And then, of course, as the parent, what do you do when they're standing right in the middle of the room with their eyes, covered, kind of peeking just a little bit? You walk around, it's like, where'd they go? Right? I can't see them anywhere. Of course, they'd believe you, right? It was amazing. You'd pretend not to see them. And they do things like that, just trying to find a place. And it's so unfair for, the parents, especially somebody like me. Finding a hiding place for me is never all that easy. Where am I going to hide? And I try to do things like this, where you sit on the couch and you put one of the pillows over you, or you get a blanket and just kind of stick yourself underneath it, right? Anybody else do that, or am I the only one? Apparently I'm the only one that did things like this. And it reminded me of a meme that came out just a few years ago, what it looks like when we're trying to hide our sin from God. And I was like, yeah, have you seen this one? I felt like that a lot, just playing hide and seek with my kids. And I feel like that's the way he thinks of us when we're trying to get away with stuff. And as the kids get older, they get better at it. Their hiding places improve, but yours never do, right? And because they were so small, they had so many places to hide, so many places to choose from. So you'd find them tucked in all sorts of places, up underneath the bed, or if you go into a closet, you have all these long hanging clothes or different things like that. They can hide right in behind them and can be completely hidden. And it gets to the point where it's almost like this. They're in a place, and the only chance you have to find them is a little itty bitty spot. But what's amazing, when the places get smaller, darker, and more cramped or more uncomfortable, from their perspective, in a lot of ways, I think there's a nervousness that sits in. Because, you weren't there with them in those dark, cramped places. And, they'd be waiting for the parent for me to come find them. They'd be waiting, maybe wondering, thinking I wasn't coming, thinking I wasn't able to find them. And then you'd hear from the distance, dark somewhere, "Are you coming? Right? Come find me." Right? That happened a lot. And what's funny is I would sometimes hear that, and I hadn't even finished counting yet. I was still sitting in my spot trying to get up to like 20, and I'd be already, "Come find me." And I was still in the same place. I hadn't even moved yet. But they would sometimes, they'd feel a little abandoned, like I didn't care for them, not to mention sometimes it really was hard to find them. Well, last week, I was sharing about the important pattern in the Scriptures. And it's that pattern that's intended to remind God's people about His character, about His nature, about His promise, that in spite of all of the hardships, in spite of all the difficulties and the tragedies that we experience in this life, and we feel like we are hidden from Him, or He doesn't find us, He doesn't see us, those hardships make us ask, where is God now when I need Him? And it causes us to think or wonder, has He abandoned us, that He doesn't love us anymore? And so we might lose hope. We might doubt His character, forget His promise. We think that we are far away from God in those kind of moments. But all the while, His intention really is to draw us closer to Him, because it's not as though He has abandoned us. It's not as though He has walked away from His people, even in the midst of a national judgment. he had not walked away from them or abandoned them. He hasn't moved. He is still very much seated in the same place that he always was. That's on his throne. He hasn't moved at all. We have. We've gone and run off and tried to find a hiding place most of the time. And he is trying to bring us home. Israel was this nation in decline because they had wandered away from his ways and his commands. They had moved away from him, and they were experiencing the consequences and the discipline that comes with it. What we see as evidence or as proof of that God doesn't love us, or something, if we goes through our mind, it's actually proof that he does. It fits what's described in Hebrews chapter 12, verse 5. He says, "Have you forgotten the warning addressed to you as sons?" He says, "My son, do not take lightly the discipline of ADONAI, or lose heart when you are corrected by him." Don't take it lightly. Don't think that he's doing this because he doesn't care for you. Because ADONAI disciplines the one he loves and punishes every son he accepts. There's this correction of trying to get you back on the correct path. Verse 7, it says, "It is for discipline that you endure." God is treating you as sons. For what son does a father not discipline? And the answer to that is, if you are without discipline, something all have come to share, then you are illegitimate and not sons really at all. It's more dangerous. It's a more disturbing situation to be in if you're doing wrong. And do we ever really not know that we're doing wrong? Right? If we don't know that we're doing wrong, that's a bigger sign of a problem. If we don't know that we're doing wrong, or we're not experiencing his discipline when we do know that we're doing wrong, that's a concern. He says in verse 9, he says, "Besides, we are used to having human fathers as instructors, and we respected them. Shall we not much more be subject to the Father of spirits and live? Indeed, for a short time they disciplined us as seemed best to them." It may not have always been best, right? But God does so for our benefit, so that we may share in his holiness. He says, "Now all discipline seems painful at the moment, not joyful." You don't have to pretend that you like it. But later, it yields, this is the goal, it yields the peaceful fruit of righteousness to those who have been trained by it. Therefore, strengthen the hands that are weak and the knees that are feeble. When you're starting to wonder, why am I going through all this? What's happening to me in this moment? We're supposed to be strengthened, that he is trying to draw something out in us and actually draw us closer to him. It's in those times when you are afraid, in the times when you're going through suffering and hardship, even if you don't understand it, even if you don't even realize or think that it's discipline from him at all, realize it's not out of spite. It's not out of sadistic pleasure. He is trying to remove the part of you that's hurting yourself most of the time. He wants you to share in his holiness. He wants you to yield that peaceful fruit of righteousness. It's in those moments your future's not over. That's the important thing to keep in mind. Your future is not over. He is trying to bring about your best future in life. See, it's in the midst of our struggles and sufferings that he says, some of the things we looked at last week, for ADONAI will comfort Zion. He will comfort all her waste places. He will make her wilderness like Eden, her desert like the garden of ADONAI. Joy and gladness will be found in her, thanksgiving and a sound of melody. All of those places, those things that we think are useless, that we've given up on, that we've just kind of let go wild. He's like, I'm going to make that fruitful again. I'm going to bring joy to the dry places. He says in verse 4, "Pay attention to me, to my memra, to my word, my people, and give ear to me, my nation, For Torah will go out from me, my justice as a light to the peoples, my righteousness is near. My salvation has gone out, and my arms will judge the nations. The coastlands will wait for me. For my arm, they will wait expectantly. So we are supposed to pay more attention to him in these moments. He says in verse 11, now the ransomed of Adonai will return. This is that future that he's talking about, how it's not over. The ransomed of Adonai will return and come to Zion with singing. Everlasting joy will be upon their heads. They will obtain gladness and joy, and sorrow and sighing will flee away. Even a nation in experiencing such judgment as Israel still has a future. Israel is still his people in spite of all that they were going through, even the advancement of the Babylonians in the moment. He says, I have put my words in your mouth and covered you with the shadow of my hand. I who set the heavens in place. You'll never forget who he is. Who laid the foundations of the earth, and say to Zion, you are my people. God's people have a future. And he is reminding them of this. He is trying to comfort them with this even before the judgment really, really comes. They had experienced some things. They've been given some warnings, but the Babylon hasn't arrived yet. And if they're already starting to think maybe God has abandoned us, boy, they're going to think that even more in the days, years ahead. And he's like, no, 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 no. I'm telling you beforehand, before they even get here, you are still my people. And so this is that promise of the future that he has for us. A nation in decline, a people in experiencing his discipline needs to know that it has a future. And this chapter opens as a call to those who are seeking after God, to those who are trying to make sense of all the chaos. You know, Isaiah is announcing this exile. He is announcing this judgment throughout the book. But again, he doesn't want them to think that God has abandoned them or broken his promise. But they do need to get ready for what is coming. You know, he says, awake, awake. You know, wake up. Don't be unaware. Don't be, drunk, but sober-minded, right? Clothe yourselves in your strength, Zion. Clothe yourself in beautiful garments, Jerusalem, the holy city. For the uncircumcised and the unclean will never invade you again. He says, clothe yourselves in your strength. Well, what does that mean? Who is their strength? He is. He is their strength. He is our strength. Psalm 28 says, Adonai is my strength and my shield. My heart trusts in him, and I was helped. Therefore my heart leaps for joy, and I will praise him with my song. It's almost as if Isaiah has read the Psalms before. Adonai is their strength, a stronghold of salvation for his anointed. In that same passage, verse 1, he talks about these beautiful garments that they are supposed to wear. These great and beautiful garments will be given for God's people. And that's something that even shows up in the book of Revelation, just as Yeshua promised. In Revelation 3, he says, the one who overcomes thus will be dressed in white clothes. I will never blot his name out of the book of life, and will confess his name before my Father and his angels. Now these white clothes, they could be understood in several different ways. They could be understood as the garments of the priests and the Levites, because they were supposed to be a kingdom of priests, right? Aren't we? It could also be the garments of the wedding party. It's in that future when Messiah is revealed, where Jerusalem truly will be what its name is supposed to be. It will truly be the city of peace. Where he says, Jerusalem, the holy city for the uncircumcised and the unclean, will never invade you again. And he's saying that to a Jerusalem that it will be invaded soon. He promises in that day, in that future, in that messianic kingdom, Jerusalem, it's never going to see what it's about to. It's never going to be under siege again. And the only ones that will be coming to the city, the only ones that are allowed into the city, are those who are on that highway of holiness. Only those who are coming to the mountain of ADONAI, who are seeking to be taught His Torah and walk in His ways, as chapter 2 of Isaiah talks about. Only they will be the ones entering into the city of His throne. So what they were experiencing in their lifetime, what we experience in our lifetime, in that day, that's not going to be happening. This great reversal will happen. Those that the world, has oppressed and put down into the dirt, it's those people that are God's people that are going to be raised up. Verse 2, he says, "Shake off the dust and arise." So if they're arising from the dust. They're arising from where they have been knocked down. They're arising from where that invading army has basically ground them into the dirt. Shake off the dust and arise. Jerusalem itself, the whole city in many respects, the temple, all those things had been knocked over, knocked down. Be enthroned, Jerusalem, because you're going to arise. Be enthroned, Jerusalem. Loose the bonds off your neck, that slavery or that captivity, captive daughter of Zion. For thus says Adonai, you were sold for nothing, and so you will be redeemed without silver. The methods of payment that the world demands for release from captivity is not going to be how they will be redeemed. They'll be purchased back from slavery and oppression, not by wealth that we even see negotiations for the release of captives today over in Israel. They're talking about Hamas is being offered, hey, we'll let go 40 people of yours for every one of ours, 100 people of yours for every one of ours. And they said, nope, that's not good enough. It's not going to be by wealth or negotiation. It's not going to be when someone can pay for you and you can earn enough money on your own to pay your debt. Instead, it's with something far more valuable, a provision more like the one provided to Abraham when he was commanded to offer up his son Isaac, and he learned that He is the Lord our provider, the Lord who provides. Or it's going to be a redemption price that God allowed the Israelites when He redeemed them from Egypt. And again, proving this whole idea, proving once again how much Isaiah influenced the writers of the New Testament. Because he says, you will be redeemed without silver. And Peter comes along in chapter 1 and says, you know that you were redeemed from the futile way of life, from that life of slavery, handed down from your ancestors, not with perishable things such as silver or gold. Can you see how he must have read Isaiah before? But with the precious blood like that of a lamb without defect or spot, the blood of Messiah. He was chosen before the foundation of the world, but was revealed in these last times for your sake. So the present suffering that we are going through does not shake or dissuade or stop God's future, what He has in mind. The calling of Abraham, the creation of the nation, and all the nations of the earth being blessed through the seed of Abraham, that has been the plan all along, chosen before the foundation of the world. The coming of Messiah ben David, where he is sitting on the throne, on the kingdom of God, it actually requires the redemption of the people. It requires them being purchased out of slavery to sin. It requires the removal of sin, because if we were to try to stand before the King of Kings without our sin being dealt with, what would happen to us? Wouldn't we all be put aside with the goats, where there's the dividing of the sheep and the goats? The sheep are gone to his right, the goats are there to his left, and because he says, "I never knew you." If we've not been redeemed and set free from our sin, we're all going over, and there would be no sheep. The removal of our sin is accomplished by the blood of the Lamb, the suffering of Messiah ben Yosef. Before the conquering king, before Messiah ben David sits on the throne, the suffering servant Messiah ben Yosef must come. Messiah purchasing our redemption with his life, dying in our place. That's been the plan and purpose of God all along. And we call it, the gospel. We call it the good news of redemption. But we have to understand that's not an invention by the apostles. It's not by Paul. It's not by anybody in the New Testament era. The origin of the good news is the heart of God. And again, it's been there from the very beginning. It's been there even here in Isaiah 52. He says, "Therefore my people will know my name. Therefore in that day I am the one who will be saying, Hineni." In the difficulty and fear of the moment, we ask that question, "God, where are you? Are you hiding from me?" And he says, "Hineni, here I am. I've been here this whole time." And he proves it. He's proving that he's been here all along, even in the midst of our suffering, in how they will be redeemed without silver. And it's something else of great value, because he's not really playing hide and seek with us. You and I just don't see him. We just don't see what he is doing or where he is going, because his ways are not our ways. They don't necessarily make sense to us. We have a hard time seeing it when he does things. Paul, says this plan, this redemption through the suffering of Messiah, he calls it in Corinthians, he calls it foolishness to the Gentiles, right? And a stumbling block to the Jews, because that doesn't fit the narrative. We want the Messiah ben David to come. We don't have to want to worry about the other one happening first. But the good news of redemption is right here. When he says, "I am the one who will be saying, Hineni," he says, "How beautiful on the mountains are the feet of him who brings good news." Brings good news. Who announces shalom, who brings good news of happiness, who announces salvation, who says to Zion, "Your God reigns." This redemption, this future, in the Tanakh, in the Hebrew, it's essentially the word basar. In the Septuagint, do I have this up here? I never put that in there. There we go. The good news is basar, but in the Septuagint, that's the LXX. It's that really long word that I'm going to mispronounce if I try. But what does it look like? No, evangelismano, or whatever else. Yeah. Anybody else with an expert tongue want to say that one? Doesn't it look like the word evangelize? Eulogize, but it's also part of that speaking good over someone, but it's essentially evangelize, where you're bringing the good news. So it's you're announcing peace. You're bringing good news of happiness. So in the Hebrew, it's basar, where we get the word for the New Testament is often called basora. But it's also that one where we get the whole idea of eulogize or evangelism. And that's here in Isaiah. That's 700 years before Yeshua is born. They're already talking about the good news. So to those who know this message, those who share and can testify and share this good news, this Basora, those who bring it to the nations, all those various mountains, the kingdoms that are still standing in today's world that have not yet been brought low before his exalted kingdom, like we read about in Isaiah chapter 2. Those people who bring a message of foolishness about the suffering Messiah to redeem them, he says that's beautiful. How beautiful on the mountains are the feet of him who brings good news, who carry this good news of redemption, and they are essentially extending the rule and reign of the kingdom of God. They're bringing a little bit of that soil with them and planting it there as an embassy. And it's when those types of promises are fulfilled, when they are brought about fully and completing, when who announces salvation, who say to Zion, your God reigns, when all of that is fulfilled, verse 8 says, the voice of your watchmen, they will lift up their voices. It's not going to be a voice of alarm, a voice of fear and panic. He says, together they are shouting for joy, for they will see eye to eye when Adonai returns to Zion. Now, I thought this was kind of strange. They will see eye to eye. Where do the watchmen typically stand when they're doing their job versus where does everybody else stand? They'll be up on the wall, they'll be up in a tower, whatever else like that. They'll be up there and they'll be out there watching. Well, what happens? How is it possible that they're going to be able to see eye to eye with everybody else? Are they going to need the wall anymore? Are they going to need to be up there on the wall for defense or trying to protect everybody, right? They're no longer going to be under siege. They're going to be eye to eye, so they're going to be everybody's going to be down on ground level because the walls won't be even needed anymore. Because it will truly be a city of peace. He says, break forth in joy, sing together, you ruins of Jerusalem, for Adonai has comforted his people. He has redeemed Jerusalem. This is the future that he doesn't want his people to forget. Even in the midst of their discipline, even in the midst of the judgment that is coming, this day is coming. Never lose sight of it. No matter the trial and the struggle of today, this future, this promise, we've got to hold on to. We've got to believe that when Messiah comes to establish his kingdom, it will be a future of joy and celebration. It's not denying the reality that of struggle and suffering today. It's not denying the reality that Jerusalem is in ruins. Sing together, you ruins of Jerusalem. So they had experienced it. But that state, that situation is not the end. He is comforting you by letting you know, letting you see a glimpse of the future that he has in store, that it's not over. You are not abandoned. This present state is not the end. You have a glorious future. You have an inheritance, as Peter talks about, that will never perish, spoil, or fade. That is kept. It's reserved for you in God's future. It may be held in heaven at the moment, as Peter talks about, but it's coming down when he sits on the throne of his kingdom. And all the earth will see that in that day. Verse 10 says, Adonai has bared his holy arm before the eyes of all the nations. So who sees this? Is it just his people? No, it's everybody sees this. All the ends of the earth will see the salvation of our God. So even the nations will see it. They'll give an opportunity to see. And what's great is about all of this is so much is that good news, that mystery of God is also, they'll be given a chance to even respond to this good news, this promise of salvation. Be given a chance to respond. That's been part of the good news from the beginning. From you, Abraham, all the nations of the earth will be blessed. And like his discipline, it always will start with a call to return to him, to teshuva, to repentance from the fruitless deeds of darkness, from the breaking of the Torah, from lawlessness or Torahlessness, and turning to him and to his ways. And it's a call that comes to both Jew and Gentile who are wrapped up in the ways of the world and submitting, even unknowingly sometimes, to the kingdom of darkness and the man of lawlessness. He calls in these moments to return to him. And that's why he says, leave. Leave and get out of there. Touch no unclean thing. Get out of her midst. Purify yourselves, you who carry the vessels of Adonai. Adonai has bared his arms. He is opening his arms wide. He is inviting those from his people scattered among the nations, and those of the nations that want to take hold of the tzitzit of the Jew and go with them because they've heard that the Lord is with them, to find their Creator and King of all humanity. And he's saying, come out, leave, get out of that and come to my kingdom. Paul refers to this in Acts chapter 17. So he says, from one man, talking to Adam, he made every nation of men to live on the face of the earth, having set appointed times and the boundaries of their territory. So there's no human being on the planet that cannot trace their source back to Adam, right? He says they were to search for him and perhaps grope around for him and find him, yet he is not far from each one of us. Does it sound like playing hide and seek just a little bit? He wants to be found. And when we realize it, it's sometimes he is the one standing there like this, covering his eyes, saying, can you see me? Can you see me? And we're walking around like, I don't see him anywhere. Where is he? Except we're not pretending. We don't see him. And he's standing there like this. Hello? Right here. Right here. We can't see him. They were to search for him and perhaps grope around for him and find him. Yet he is not far from each one of us. He wants to be found by those turning from the world and to him and his ways. And he wants as many as possible to hear and respond to the good news brought by those who are with the beautiful feet on the mountains, right? Both Jew and Gentile are called to come up to the mountain of God, to hear his Torah, to be taught his ways and walk in his paths, and pledge their loyalty to the King Messiah Yeshua. Something that all of us, Jew and Gentile, must do. Faith in Messiah, it doesn't contradict or prevent us or tell us not to walk in his Torah. It's the faith in Messiah that makes it possible. Responding to Messiah requires a new way of life, and that requires leaving behind the old one, becoming a new creation, as we were reading about earlier, fleeing from it as Joseph fled from Potiphar's wife. Everyone must get out of the nations, leave the kingdom of darkness, reject any loyalty to the man of lawlessness, and become a citizen of God's nation by faith in Messiah Yeshua, to be made holy, sanctified, and discipled by the word, the Torah of God. Because we are carrying a holy vessel, as that passage had mentioned in Isaiah. We are carrying a holy vessel, a sacred offering to present before him. We not only do we carry his word, but even more than that, we don't show up empty-handed. We come with an offering. And it's that living sacrifice. I urge you, therefore, brothers and sisters, by the mercies of God, to present your bodies as a living sacrifice, holy and acceptable to God, which is your spiritual service, which is your act of worship. And again, so that comes to that statement of, do not be conformed to this world, but be transformed by the renewing of your mind, so that you may discern what is the will of God, what is the good and acceptable and perfect. And that's what you're supposed to walk in. All of this fulfillment of promise of King Messiah, of Yeshua on the throne in Jerusalem, and the gathering of his people from the four corners of the earth. This is going to be the future. This is the one that we should look forward to and anticipate and hold on to no matter what. And it's going to be a greater moment, a greater exodus than what Moses and the Israelites experienced so long ago. That is such of what even Passover is all about. But because unlike the first exodus, this greater one, some of the elements that we read about or we participate in Passover, it's not going to require of us to remember in the same way. It won't require such haste. It won't require such urgency, almost as if the outcome was uncertain or the threat from behind us is so dangerous. Instead, in 52 verse 12, he says, "For you will not go out in haste." So it's different. It's going to be a different kind of bringing home, of redemption, than what they experienced with Moses. "Nor will you go in flight. For ADONAI will go before you, and the God of Israel will be your rear guard." There won't be a need to hurry. There won't be a need, and if you're not in such a hurry, then are you going to need the bread of affliction, right? That unleavened matzah, right? They had to have that because they didn't have time to let it rise, right? But you're not going to be in a hurry. Nothing that the nations throw at God's people will endure. No weapon formed against us will prosper. Nothing that the invading armies of Assyria or Babylon that they did in Isaiah's day, nor anything that is thrown in our day will be able to undo what God's future is all about, what he has promised, what he has in store for his people. Nothing that happens that we see will break that future and prevent it from happening. So even when the chaos erupts all around us, even when you hear the wars and rumors of wars, when you hear about the earthquakes, the bad news, the eclipses, or whatever, wind and wave that is tossing your boat around, don't be alarmed, because the future is secure. We have his promise. We have his word and the testimonies of all his prophets telling us, comforting us, that it's going to be okay. Fix your eyes on Yeshua, the author and perfecter of our faith. That's what Hebrews 12 talks about, the beginning of that chapter that's even on discipline. Therefore, since we have such a great cloud of witnesses surrounding us, encouraging us, reminding us, let us also get rid of every weight and entangling sin. Let us run with endurance the race set before us, fixing our eyes on Yeshua, the initiator and perfecter of faith. For the joy set before him, he endured the cross, disregarding its shame, and he has taken his seat at the right hand of the throne of God. That promise is coming. Consider him. And when we think about our circumstances, when we think about our hardships and our suffering, he says, consider him who has endured such hostility by sinners against himself, so that you may not grow weary in your souls and lose heart. When that day comes, when his justice, when his truth come upon the earth, when King Messiah sits upon the throne and enforces his rule and his reign, that's a day you want to be around for. That's a day you want to be alive for. It's by our faith in him that we will all awaken on that day. Whether we have fallen asleep before that day or whether we are alive in the moment, we're all going to be awake to see that day come. And by faith in him, we will awaken on that day, and the promises will be fulfilled, and Jerusalem will be the true city on a hill, that its light will shine, and all that pain and sorrow will be put aside. and there will be joy and singing. And so we need to pledge our loyalty to the King, to respond to that good news, that Besorah, to trust Him for your future. That's what we need. Father, I just come